Hi, this is David Sime. As you know, I'm working with the Site Network, who have recently partnered with Parallel Worlds, and we're building a trans-global interoperable universe using digital technologies, everything from NFTs and IoT to augmented and virtual reality, and even an underpinning of blockchain to take away the siloization of the world to allow people to come together digitally or physically or both. And we thought this would be a really good opportunity for Jamie to describe what it is that he has done, what it is that he's been doing subsequently, and how it fits with our overall project going forward. So, Jamie, great to be talking to you again, as always. Give us a bit of background to yourself and what it is that you created and why.
First of all, let me say I'm really excited to have this conversation. Previous to 2018, I was a copywriter and creative director for New York City agencies for about 15 years or so. I originally was a psych and philosophy major, going to be a clinical psychologist like my father before me, but I realized I could shape a lot more hearts and minds with some headlines that some clients were paying a lot of money to get in front of people. But over time, I really fell in love with the product development side of what turned out to be the philosophy of product market fit. So around the time of 2018, right before I met you, my eyes were open to the entire world of Web3 that was just starting to peek its head around the corner and show us a picture of what the future was about to be. Hence why I filed in 2018 what turned out to be the world's first NFT patent, a system and method for identifying virtual products. And as that got filed, of course, it went into stealth because I'm not Nike. I don't know what that tech was going to do at that point. I kind of set it and forget it. And then went about really digging into the other parts of Web3. So I started building out the practice of brand therapy, which allows brands to speak for themselves, knowing that AI was around the corner. So how could we start building a discipline for brand strategy that would be applicable to the conversational network that is now happening. And along with that, starting to get into the tokenization and XR space. So along with forming brand therapy in 2018 and filing, I started to co-found a number of startups. And now I've got, including Parallel Worlds and the Team Flow Institute, 7 co-foundings under my belt, as well as the founding of Marked. So it's been quite a journey from then till now, and an exciting one to say the least.
Absolutely. It was interesting because when we first started talking about this, the deep fakes was the big concern, and it was kind of your
Yeah.
early applications of AI in media, and we were talking about, oh, we could use that for verification of original content for the likes of Reuters, so that we know that Obama isn't saying, push the nuclear button. Somebody decided to make him say through a deep fake, and to be able to identify the origin and anything that happened to that subsequently, which is what
Yeah.
blockchains are really good for. And I thought, oh, there's a really good opportunity there. But of course, things have moved on. And the conversations that I had with the guys over in Site Network, who are now obviously partnered with you guys, was originally, how are we going to move from one virtual reality world or augmented reality world to another whilst retaining our identity? And even at the time, we knew that was going to have to be a kind of a substrata layer of blockchain that all of these other platforms, currently walled gardens, could tap into, could connect to. But the issue was, how do you then update the content, the appearance? Moving from Minecraft to Fortnite, you're going to look a bit different, right? And at the time, we were coming up with all manner of ways for people to do that manually. But now, of course, we've got AI for that. So, there's a lot of stuff which can be automated that was really the blocker to, some of the realization of it. And those have gone away. But what seems to have not happened is that anybody but you had actually come up with the idea and protected it, most importantly, for that underpinning. So now the rest of the world is ready for the concept that you were ready for years ago, and we are ready to go. And this is what I find quite exciting: is that you guys, on your side of the Atlantic, have got some incredible skills and talents and people and power behind this, as do we, obviously, on the UK side of the Atlantic.
I'd say where the difference lies there is because in America, yeah, sure, we have great talent, you have great talent. We go through waves, which are very destabilizing, but all of a sudden you'll go, this idea of summer and winter for crypto will go throw tons of money into the space, and people will build somewhat smartly, but mostly stupidly, and get some infrastructure in place, and then we'll go through winter. You guys build a lot more smartly. You guys built with a lot more regulation and with purpose in every single step of the way. So it's a different way of doing things. So it's been an interesting part of watching groups like Parallel Worlds form on our side of the pond, and groups like Site form on your side of the pond.
You know, it's interesting you should say that because on the two side, well, basically Europe versus the USA, a lot of money will go into things like we've got the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, right? Now that requires a lot of money to build, and there was a similar project going to happen in America, but the problem was it was government funded, and governments come and go, don't they? So their priorities and their spending priorities come and go. Whereas in UK and Europe, if everybody puts a wee bit in, we can have longer term strategies and then continual, not huge, but continual and reliable, most importantly, funding and attention over long periods of time. And that seems to be, for some reason or somehow, luckily died into the wool over here. We don't do grand, but we do constant. You know,
It's interesting when there are some examples of what going big. Large Hadron Collider is a wonderful example, but so is Mistral, which is the AI coming out on the European side. Or I don't even remember the name of it, but the French internet, whatever that was called back in the early 80s. And honestly, it ran till just a few years ago, I believe a decade ago. And it's this mixture of how much government, the hand of the government is going to work versus how much the hand of the market is. And for the most part, I'd say there's a reason why America tends to be ahead overall. It's noisier. There's way more collateral damage, shall we say, going through it. But although we don't end up with our own Large Hadron Collider, we do end up with 3 different space companies forming in the middle of a year.
yeah.
Or we end up with the CHIPS Act, which is a great example of when the government comes in and says, here's the foundation of money. Now, what private enterprise is going to come in and sit on top of this? And it's usually a 10-to-1 around kind of growth model where we're putting in whatever it may be, $100 billion, $60 billion into the CHIPS Act, which is creating $600 billion worth of investment from TSMC and Intel and all these other companies, which is perfect timing because a lot of the onshoring that's going on is going to be very, very necessary for groups like us who are going to need an insane amount of servers. It's just a matter of, are those servers going to be ours, or are they going to be decentralized across our entire user network, just like our coin?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really interesting, actually, because I've found this, but you and I both work in extended realities, and I'm super pleased that well, with AI, we've got many horses in the race in terms of chip manufacturing, even different approaches. With virtual reality, we've got Unity and Unreal. If we only had Unity or Unreal, we'd be nowhere. But because there's this 2-horse race, they're competing with each other, and that's what works really nicely in a kind of a very free market economy like you have in the States, where the competition drives innovation, it drives prices down, it drives market acquisition. It's good for the consumer. Now, the further you go into the more kind of socialist approaches that you have here, you've got buffers. You've also got barriers to growth because there's a lot more taxation for smaller growth businesses. So it's harder to get started. But you do have, when you get to a certain level, a degree of support, but that can make people a little bit, well, lazy, So you simply don't have the speed of innovation, but you do have a buffer. So things will last longer. It will take forever to grow, but it will last longer. But what I find is the best thing is when you combine the two, because then what you've got is a nice solid foundation that keeps things going and is a good, like, when you fall, you only fall so far. Yeah. And then you've got the innovation and the rocket propelled growth that you get in the States. And people look to the States for that rocket. They look there for the first innovations. Yeah. So again, you've got a market. So it's stability, speed, strength, market focus. It's all these things together. And that's why we never planned to do this, what we're doing. We never realized that we would be in 2 perfectly complementing businesses at the same time, exactly when it was needed. But here we are, And
what I do love about how we both work is we're very philosophical and ethical about our thinking and what we need to have on a centralized level to make sure that the decentralized space and the innovation space and the iterative space that we want to offer everybody has as best a chance as possible to happen. So we end up with, parallel worlds using an American incorporation. We are a public benefit corporation. That doesn't mean we're a nonprofit, but it does mean that our goal, our purpose in life is tied to our bottom line, and it's inextricable as per our filing. And what is our goal is an open metaverse. We want to ensure that we're going to be, even against our own profits, working against a centralized system and working towards consumer ownership and platformization of products. And that brings us back around to the patent. That brings us back around to how we'll be co-developing the products that we want others to not just buy, but to develop with, and not just develop on their own, but to sell and encourage consumers to become prosumers and add their own value to and sell on, which is going to require the blockchain. It's going to require open authentication. And another auto word that I think is important to get into the technology that we're talking about, which is object autonomy. The amount of, on a technical level, it's assets and smart contracts and algorithms and AI that are going to be built into every single NFT. But another way of putting it is just, hey, you'll be able to own digital products, and those digital products will be able to express themselves physically and in any other way, any other modality, but they'll still be one object that you'll be able to own, add value to, and pass on. So we've got all that tech down, but it's really about expressing the benefit to the consumer, or I should say prosumer, that we're really interested in iterating and making sure that aligns with the market.
Let's dig into the strata of that. Because there's a few that, I mean, even at the very outset, if you look at NFTs and how they were used before, and I think they were hopefully just far away enough from the remaining stink of the carpetbaggery that happened with the early NFTs, where really what people were selling was receipts. They were saying, here's a receipt, and it's attached to this product. It's like, yeah, but the product's a digital product, and nobody really cares whether I've got a receipt. So, whereas what you're doing is actually inextricably tied to the product, even before we get into the prosumerism. So could you give us a bit? So, and we will get to that, but let's start at the top layer here, because there's the new kinds of coins, the 404, I believe.
That's one of them. Yeah, an ERC standard. Yes.
So could you give? I mean, a lot of the people who are going to be watching this might not have an understanding of really what that is and how that differs from previous NFTs, previous standards, etc. So how does this differ from like a standard coin or standard token or standard NFT?
Sure. So very, very quickly, this all starts with Satoshi's paper in 2008, which introduced the idea of blockchain, which said that very receipt. It really was just saying, how can we make a database that is immutable? You cannot delete it. And the way we do it is by decentralizing. There is no centralized authority. It means that anybody who holds the coin is an owner in the system and makes the system work. So in and of itself, that was the revolutionary moment that we can say, okay, what are we going to build on top of this foundation of blockchain? And in the beginning, that was just Bitcoin. So the way everybody mostly knows blockchain in any way, shape, or form is that term Bitcoin, which is a coin built on a chain, the Bitcoin chain. And it just says that every single coin is something on a decentralized network that we all own. Then along comes another guy in around 2014, Vitalik Buterin, who says, can't do anything with this coin. It's holding value. We can do so much more. So he introduces Ethereum. And Ethereum, instead of it being Bitcoin, is Ether, ETH as its own coin. My son just bought his own first amount of ETH this week. So we're very excited and watching the price just now that the ETF passed. But it started off with its own, just a coin to begin with, ERC20. And what started there was standards. It was saying, okay, this is a decentralized network. We may have all the coins to begin with, but the whole point is this is decentralized. We want everybody to be a participant of it, which means we're not going to be in control. We're going to be a thought leader in the space, but we're not the Fed. So here's Ethereum. And then around the time that I filed my patent, ERC 721 came along. And that was the standard that allowed for that receipt that we're talking about, an object to have a digital receipt. And what it said was, here on the blockchain, this address, whatever that address is pointing to, is owned by whoever possesses this ERC 721 contract in their blockchain wallet. People might know a wallet from MetaMask or Coinbase wallet. Basically, it's just a digital wallet. And it just is assigned, it's its own little address to you. people remember way back in the first iteration of the internet, nobody had names, no addresses. URLs were a bunch of numbers. We're kind of still a little bit in that phase with CCIDs and things like that in the blockchain world, and we're slowly getting out of that. But what it allowed for was finally an NFT, a non-fungible token. So every single time you were talking about a coin, that's a fungible token. Fungible just means they're all the exact same. A dollar is a dollar is a dollar. A Bitcoin's a Bitcoin's a Bitcoin. ETH is an ETH is an ETH. But a non-fungible token, an NFT, is completely unique. That unique address that goes for that 721 receipt says this is the only one of its kind. This is a one of one. Okay, now that that's all set up, we then start getting more and more standards. Along comes Engine, the people who created the Engine network did ERC 1155, and that allowed for smart contracts. Now we have smart money, money with purpose, an object which holds value, which can say, based on the algorithm that's stored inside of me, this is my behavior. So we get things like saying, all right, if I sell my NFT, somebody else owns it, but I'm an artist and I have IP in here, and I want to make sure I'm going to get a share of that if it sells on. Well, the smart contract built into an ERC 1155 would say every single time somebody resells that digital painting, then 5%, making up a number, goes back to the original artist. All of a sudden, people could now be a creator, sell art, and get a bit of the profit every time their art raises in value and is sold on. So it creates a different kind of more sustainable environment for creators, for brands as well. This could be a Nike crypto kick. It doesn't matter what it is. The royalties will keep going.
Yeah.
And the standards kept coming. And then my patent ended up getting granted in May of 2022. During that year, we tried really, really hard to figure out how best to create a digital object that would have a mark. So we've got an NFT, and we've got a mark that's an NFT, and they're attached together, but this one references this one. How is this working? And we really couldn't do it. This was just me and Ganesh, who's Hegde, which is my blockchain developer over at Marked. We just were trying this. And then all of a sudden, an ERC standard came along called 6551. And that allowed for an NFT to hold its own wallet. Now, here's why that's a game changer. That means that the NFT itself, not you holding the wallet holds the NFT, but in your wallet, the NFT that holds its own wallet can hold any number of other assets. That means if it's a JPEG of a piece of art, then now we have the augmented reality version of it. Or we have the physical piece of art with an NFC chip that says, okay, this is the digital twin for this one. Now that's a part of it too. And a rights contract and a smart contract that says, okay, here's royalties. Or a fractionalization program that says, okay, you can now split this into 500 pieces and sell it to other people, whatever you want to do with the contract. And that can all be inside that master NFT. But that means that when you're selling the master NFT, it all goes with it. It's not like you're selling a piecemeal. It can all be attached together. So that was the moment that we were allowed, or we allowed ourselves to start building the mark. And we're starting with marked.art. So for digital artists sign their signature. That signature, which if you look at throughout time, 10,000 years ago, what made art that creator's art? Their signature, their handprint, their X, their sign, their Bob Ross, little ROSS, whatever it was, it says, okay, this is mine. So we use that object as the NFT that actually holds all the different versions of the art as well as its provenance. And I'll get into that later, but that's a whole other level of what is going to add capability and value and engagement to the system that we're building.
So in terms of the way that Parallel Worlds is working in Site Network and what we're building together, we're trying to build. I mean, one of our core initial markets is going to be tourism, and tourism has got so many applications for this kind of technology. You've got the location itself, you've got the traveler themselves, and all of the identity that goes with that traveler. You've got the physical products that people can buy in the location that they get to, or maybe can't buy in the location that they get to because it's too big to get in the hand luggage on the plane on the way back. But if they can go back in virtual reality and say, okay, I want that 6 foot tall straw donkey, then they can order that thing and it's attached, right? But not only that, it's attached in the virtual world that they go back to visit. It's attached in the augmented reality world, should they wish, when they're physically there. It can be recreated, but it's always still the same object. And even if they move through different platforms that have got different aesthetics, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So you're removing those barriers, but it's still you're creating an indelible transitionary identity, not transitionary identity, what would be the better word for this one? It's very much permanent, but it's permanent across any reality, whether that be physical or digital or something in between. So the applications for what you had already created are so perfect for this landscape that we find ourselves creating. And as you mentioned earlier on, we are on both sides of the Atlantic and now together creating interoperability because nobody else was, because nobody else was incentivized to do so. If you look at social media channels, anybody who is interested in getting the maximum reach for a post on a social media channel knows that the last thing you do if you're on Facebook is put a YouTube link on it, or if you're on LinkedIn, put a Twitter link on your post, because bam, nobody's going to see it, because they don't want people leaving their walled gardens. And the same is true of all of these different virtual platforms that we have out there, and even AR platforms. It's more controllable and more profitable to keep people on your platform where they're looking at the advertising that you're being paid to show them. But we don't care. We want people moving from place to place, and we're going to make it that they have to allow people to move from place to place. And fundamentally, that's going to be reliant on the system that you created.
Well, one of the things that often holds innovation back is that the entities, the people, the organizations that are a part of the old, they don't recognize the value in the new, so they'll try to hold on and keep people from that change. So one of the things that's important to understand about going decentralized and platforming all objects, that doesn't mean that the platforms, those worlds, go away. It just means that their role within the space can change. So we'll have that autonomy I was speaking of. All of a sudden, these objects can post for social media for themselves. They can hold their own likes and shares and comments. So speaking of that provenance, if I take that art and I put it on Twitter, somebody can like it and comment in the art itself. That's adding to its value. If I buy a piece of art and add 1,000 followers to it, it's now worth more, regardless of what the market says it's worth. I've added value to it. If some famous reviewer puts a comment in the art, not on Twitter, because Twitter can take it down. That guy that owned @music for X, Musk said, nope, that's ours now. We're taking that. You can have @musicman or whatever you want. You can't do that in a decentralized platform where the platform isn't in charge. Those old walled gardens are in charge. When they're not in charge, though, they still are harbingers of culture. They have a space that people might want to go to. And that goes back to the provenance again. NFTs, another way of thinking about them, are story baskets. And when you are a tourist, there's different phases to being a tourist. There's the pre-travel time when you've booked and you're getting excited and you have all these things you're trying to learn about it. And we just talked about this the other day. How wonderful is it to another Web3 technology, VR, pre-go to that space, familiarize yourself, immersively understand. Immersion works well for learning a language, but it works well for learning a culture. Yep. So getting all that in is a great way to give you a running head start to really take advantage of your time when you're actually there. And then when you're actually there and you want to go buy an object, wonderful, that's great, buy an object, but now it becomes a story basket. So instead of one of those things where it's like you go on a tour and then you buy like, I don't know, we were in Costa Rica and they had these little rainforest frogs that would make a ribbit sound if you run them, but it turned out you turn it over, there's a sticker that said made in Thailand. Very indigenous friendly Costa Rican kind of product. Yeah. But now we have an NFC technology that can say, okay, where is this authentically from and prove it to me. And on top of that, I'm going to now add my story to it. So that when I take that object home, the pictures, the videos, the augmented smells, you can do smells, sounds, it doesn't matter. All these different things can be stored in this object. It's not just about an NFT itself as a digital object that says, okay, this is files that we have immutably attached to it. They can be stored in the objects themselves. One of the wonderful things about an NFT being a story basket is it's not just about digital objects, it's about phygital objects, physical and digital objects that are tied together. So everybody really does already understand this intuitively because of things that they have in their house that are of sentimental value. So a wonderful example I give is this illustration right here is Eugene Sparrow was on the boat with Albert Einstein in 1942 from England to America. And this is one of 20, I believe. And it was passed down from my great aunts to my grandmother to my mother to me. And there's even a letter in the back talking about the handover from my great aunt to my grandmother when my grandfather passed.
Nice.
And it's one of those things where we share the story, we pass it on. It means a lot to me. I consider Einstein more important as the founder of IRC than the inventor of E equals MC squared. To be fair, E equals MC squared is a little more important. But as a refugee himself, I really do look to this picture a lot in how my family and I define ourselves. And it's still something that's oral history. Now imagine if there were an NFC chip inside of it, and it was something that I could just tap to, and things that were actually authentically added over time by my different ancestors who I can't talk to anymore were locked in this, and that there were a digital twin of this, and that this digital twin could be passed around. It could be my digital gallery. It could go on tour. It could tell its story. Well, it can't do any of that if it's not an authentic digital twin, because people need to know what's true. Because we're also in the age of generative AI, where we can't trust anything anymore. And we're just entering into that, but it's a wonderful thing that blockchain is advanced to the point that it's able to now pick up the torch of proving reality for us, just as digital generative parameters have advanced to the point that we really can't tell anymore. So by combining those two things, we're able to save the news in general, but we're also able to make sure that we're always anchoring to reality, whatever that may be, or not. Of course, this source can be linked back to a nefarious person, but the point is, it's always going to be linked back from the point of minting. So it's on what we were saying earlier before about centralized and decentralized. You really can't have one without the other, or I should say you can always have centralized, but you can't have decentralized without centralized units of trust. You can't have a news network to have blockchain certified news going out there if you don't have the New York Times or the Guardian or the BBC or PBS certifying it in the first place. But that could also be Newsmax or Truth Social or whatever that may have other reasons, but now you'll know where it came from.
And most importantly, you'll know the iterations that it's gone through between you looking at it and where it came from, and that gives you an indelible, unfakeable record of history. So even if it originally came from somewhere dodgy, you can track it down to that and go, well, that doesn't look like it, or even if loads of people have spat out as verbatim truth or whatever, that's fine. You can trace it back to origin, and that's the beauty of decentralized ledgers, is that there's no way to fake that. The other thing that you what's that, sorry?
Sorry, you can democratize it too. This is something where, like, we only limit this to this kind of stuff. Now it's for everything. When you're going to buy a physical or a digital Nike crypto kick, and then you add value to it, that prosumerism I was talking about before, and I add some provenance to it, add some value to it, and I sell it on, that also changes the idea in your head of what it means to own things. So we live in a consumer society where part of how we define ourselves, conspicuous consumption, is by what brands I associate myself with.
Sure.
And because of that, just to finish the point, what that does is it defines us as somebody who needs to purchase and hold. But when you own things, that merely by the mechanics of how it exists is to hold it, to add your part of the story to it, add value to it so you can sell it on. It changes your perspective about things. This isn't something that I keep and define myself by. It's something that I add my perspective to and then sell on. It's not only about owning things, it's about legacy. That moves us actually back to a more indigenous way of thinking. Indigenous culture could know death is only the end if you think the story was about you.
Well, this is the way that I love to think. I mean, both you and I have backgrounds in marketing, and marketing is all about looking at trends of the past, ascertaining how frequently and reliably they repeat, and then using that as a means of predicting, or at least having a better grasp on the present and the future. And that turns out to be a very useful skill across lots of other things apart from marketing. And here's one, because when you think about what you're describing here, it's not a new thing. If you know that there's iron ore in a patch of ground, you can own that patch of ground, you can buy it. That has a certain value, but it's not very much per gram of iron, right? because you've got to do the mining of the iron to get the ore out. And then that ore becomes of a higher value because you put effort in. And then somebody smelts that down and turns it into purified or rarefied iron. That's a whole other level, right? Then somebody adds other elements to it and turns it into a steel, let's say, stainless steel, which again has higher value. And then somebody else takes that stainless steel and makes it into, takes it where it needs to be taken. That's a value as well. And then turns it into objects, anything from hairpins to horseshoes. And again, higher value. But every single person is adding value all the way along the line. Now, that's easy for us to imagine with a physical object because we've been doing it since time immemorial, right? Not with digital. But what you're describing allows us to do the same with digital. Now, if we go back to that original person, let's go back to the not getting your thing, which is supposed to be a South American croaking frog,
Sure.
and then finding out it's made in Taiwan. The other thing that this does is using this chain, we can trace it back to source, and the person who originally made it can be remunerated. If that's somebody in an indigenous culture in a village somewhere who's created a thing and they want to stay in that village and keep doing what they're doing, but they can actually still be making money when somebody's turned that into, I don't know, an augmented reality 50-foot high frog in the middle of Central Park, right? They still get paid because it's still their frog, right? Which I think is wonderful in itself. But as you're saying, everybody who's got it from small wooden handheld object through to and the thousands of iterations that cause it to become this giant AR frog in Central Park, they also get rewarded and therefore incentivized. So therefore you get this spread, this kind of incentivized spread of creatives, because creatives have, they do not do well out of consumer capitalism. You know, the people who do the good stuff generally do not get the big money from it. It's the
In the
brokers.
definition of the word capitalism, who gets the money? The ones who are providing the capital.
Yes, exactly. And we're not being socialist here, but it is a fairer redistribution of wealth according to merit. And that's what this really is doing, is it's allowing for a meritocracy across both physical and digital, and obviously the barrier between those is becoming weaker.
Yeah, it's not to say that we're going to end capitalism, but it does allow for us to say this more feels like creatorism.
Yeah,
It's the value add is where that comes from, and that's also going to change what we know too, the marketing of everything. Another level of this is name, image, likeness, and KYC, and understanding the IP you own as an influencer and the data that's being extracted from you as a KYC, two sides of the same coin. And now that this is in objects, now that the provenance is in objects, now that the story is not about you, it's about these objects that are out there that you're a part of. We have KYP, know your product, and how those products itself are going to instill reactions because we're creating a living digital ecosystem. So everything is going to be aware of its surroundings and aware of influencing the space around it as other things react to your things.
and I think that that's something that, God, I struggle with that concept because it's such a big paradigm shift. It's a very complicated concept, but it
A
is going
lot
to
of
be.
paradigm shifts, yes.
Yeah, but when you think, I mean, there's probably going to be people watching and listening to this that are thinking, sounds a bit pyramid schemey to me. But but the thing about a pyramid scheme is it's a zero-sum game. It's a Ponzi scheme, or not always, but we've seen a hell of a lot of them that are, right? But when you think about this, there's an inherent and intrinsic value to every stage. So everybody who's being remunerated is adding something of value. If they're not adding something of value, they're not going to get anything back because nobody's going to value it, nobody's going to buy it. So it's not just going to move in one direction of added value, it's going to move in many. That's entropy for you, right? And so almost in an evolutionary branching sense, those branches which have the greatest cumulative inherent value that's been added are going to be the strongest branches. They're the ones that are going to, trickle down or add value to everybody, yeah. And those
Sure.
that aren't will die off.
Well, one of the phrases for a pyramid scheme is MLM, or multi-level marketing. And the difference here would be it's multi-level production. And it goes back to exactly what you said about it's iron ore, it's pig iron, it's steel, it's a fork. Everybody along the way, they're a part of the assembly line and they're getting enumerated for it. And we're just democratizing that into digital spaces. And an easy one to think about for this is Pokemon. You evolve your Pokemon over time. And this is one of the examples when I was forming the patent in the first place was Pokemon Go was huge. And I was wondering what all that stuff I was going to do, all that effort I was going to put into a centralized platform, and how could I take that with me? How am I supposed to go into Grand Theft Auto with my Pokemon or whatever it may be? Of course, there's mostly video games are the source for a lot of our advancement in immersive spaces. So that's where the thinking was. But it was one of those things where we still have to wait for the consumers to get to the point where they have a hunger for this. It's not just about saying that these things exist. We know after going through so many different go-to-market strategies for so many different clients over the years that just having a possibility does not mean the consumer will come. If you build it, they don't come. It doesn't work that way. Although, I remember being 5 and saying, my lemonade stand is up. Why is nobody here? This doesn't work that way. So what you actually do have to allow for is the steps that get people to that point. So one of the things I'm actually very grateful for in the mass consolidation of metaverses that are happening right now, where you have Disney paying $1.5 billion to put a Disney World inside Fortnite, or for Microsoft to be buying an entire video game company and to put all of these video games together, is they're creating intra-operability. So within a centralized system, my player is going to be able to go from world to world within that centralized space. And that's going to teach consumers, wait a second, if I can go from here to here, why can't I go over here? It's the Who Framed Roger Rabbits of the world, or the Nice Guy, or whatever that movie was with Ryan Reynolds that I keep forgetting the name of, where you have this interoperability. When IP can be shared in the same space, the objects just have to know how to interact. As long as we have those best practices in place, the gears have their own sockets and know how to interact, then sky's the limit, because all the rights will be automatically organized. We have the music industry to thank for this too. They went through all the different works for what do you do with sampling? What do you do with covering? They built all the rules in place. So it's almost automated at this point. So music is another one of those places where decentralized on-chain music files become a great example of where we've already learned over the past 20 years how to do sampling and how to do covers. But now if you do it on chain, it's automatically taken care of. You don't have to call anybody. All the rights are done. There's no negotiating to be had. The object knows, hey, you want to use me? I'm going to enumerate automatically to the artist.
It's interesting, actually. There's so many metaphors. I love my metaphors. I love going into traditional, right? And you mentioned some film references there, but the Truman Show is a good one for this, because it doesn't matter how big you make an environment in Fortnite. It doesn't matter how many, exactly as you said, you can jump from place to place to place in there. But sooner or later, it's human nature to explore the boundaries of where we are, right? Physically or whatever, right? Even in our crib, the first thing you start trying to do is try to climb out of the thing, right? That's what we do, right? That's how we spread and propagate as a species, and how many others do as well. So it's an instinctive, it's an instinct, a survival one. So what we're going to find with the likes of Fortnite and so forth is exactly that. People will go, well, why can't I move from this one to that one? And as we spoke about before, because commercially it doesn't make sense. But to those walled gardens, they're putting all this money in to keep people there and make money out of them. Why would they want to let them leave? But there comes a time when they no longer have a choice, and that's the bit that we are doing. Right, we're starting that you're no longer going to have a choice sooner or later, and we have seen this recently. So those of you who aren't familiar with the virtual reality world, up until now, you'll know that with an iPhone, it will only generally work with other Apple products, right? And that's called a closed ecosystem, and it's deliberate, and it works really nicely because they can make sure that everything works well together. But you cannot leave; it's a comfortable jail, we call it. So everything's lovely, but you can never leave. And then you've got the opposite. You've got the open infrastructure, which is like Microsoft or Android, where it'll work with everything, right? And maybe the interoperability is a little bit shakier in places, but it does lead to higher competitive forces, so lower prices, more access, more people can enter the market, more consumers can get access to the products and so forth. They both have their pros and cons, okay? I've been on both sides of this fence. They've both got their pros and cons. But what happened in the virtual reality world was everything was a closed garden. Meta, who were formerly Facebook and renamed themselves Meta because they wanted to be the metaverse, ended up creating a walled garden, which is the opposite of the metaverse, which is supposed to be a concept which is all about interoperability and being able to move around. It was just a concept that wasn't real. But then Apple entered the market, And as soon as Apple entered the market with their very, very expensive and by no means ubiquitous yet, probably won't be for another few generations, Vision Pro, because it costs about $3,000. People can't afford that, but they will, and the prices will go down. Uh, Meta went, right, okay, we can't compete with them. They are the masters of the closed ecosystem, and we are not going to try to. It's like being a boxer and you're boxing all the wee weedy guys, and then this huge brute of a man gets into the ring, and you go, right, I'm out. So that's
I
what
think they
happened.
would have stuck in it if their metaverse had worked by that point. They've poured so much in and not gotten the traction. And we've seen this is the QB effect. It's just you assume that people will come and they didn't iterate. And that's part of what's beautiful about an open ecosystem is it is as flexible as the market itself. So whatever works, you're going to have all of these failures, and that's fine. But instead of having all those failures and one success within one company, it's distributed across the entire market. But it's not only distributed across the entire, what we would think of as a professional market, it'll be distributed across the prosumer market.
Yep.
There are going to be giant IP holders. We're still going to have the Star Warses of the world. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But we are also going to have the fan fiction
Mm-hmm.
of this world, as well as the consumers. So these new kind of grayer lines of who's making and who's consuming,
Mm-hmm.
and the sharing of that, and that assembly line never ending, that is going to really change the dynamic of what's possible. And it's going to be a little noisier and a little more to choose from, but also way more iteration, way more available to everybody. And on top of all of that, enumeration right back. The royalties are going right back. Disney's going to be getting a crapload more money at the end of this because they'll have the entire market of the fan fiction world that they'll be profiting from at the same time as they're making their own professional version.
That's it. And we've already seen that kind of disruption happens almost immediately. To return to the Meta analogy, Meta immediately when they went, okay, we're going to go open infrastructure here, they got NVIDIA, one of the biggest manufacturers of the chipsets that are going to be used for artificial intelligence and virtual and augmented reality, because they're graphical processing units, GPUs. And they got Lenovo, partnered with them again, and they're all working together on like global digital twins and city scale metaverses and so forth, which I'm involved with. And loads and loads of people are getting involved immediately with them. Hardware, software, platform, infrastructure, boom, immediately. And that's because they know the way the wind is blowing. But what hasn't been done is and nobody has yet planned for, is a single unifying principle that binds all this stuff together. And when you and I started talking after a conversation on LinkedIn, we decided to have a first call. Immediately when you told me about what you were planning, I just thought, that's it right there. And at that time, what we were describing was a concept to support what was science fiction at that point. But it's not that many years later, and the time has come for it to be used. So it's kind of wonderful that we're getting to use it in something that actually we're involved with. The initial applications of interoperability, we're not going to own it all, but at least we can set a precedent, right? And start using your mark within that precedent so that other people can see it and they can start using it. So what Site Network and Parallel Worlds are doing is, I hope and trust, going to be something which is going to last forever and going to change and become unrecognizable in ways that we can't possibly predict. Again, going back to the original Facebook thing, they knew what they were selling back then, but it was, I mean, what was Facebook when they originally launched it? It was
It was
effectively,
it was the Facebook, and it was just a college. It was only Harvard, and it was just who do you know at Harvard? And the point was, it was a velvet rope. Well, you're in Harvard, okay, great. Now it's in the Ivy League. We grew college to college, but it was still the velvet rope. And every single time you try to start a social network, and I built a number of them myself, it's not a social network to start with, it's a product to start with. What am I coming for in the beginning to use that just happens to be a place where other people are congregating so that a network effect can build until the traction is there, that there is a network effect? If you don't have a network effect, what's the thing that's bringing people there in the first place? So we have a lot of that stuff when it comes to digital tourism. I'm not going for all the other people that are doing digital tourism. I'm going to the place I want to experience. I want to see the things that are going to be built there that allow me to experience talking to the objects and having an augmented reality experience and having a pre-trip there and learning the language by having a translator with me, but also informing me as I go, and having the NFT story basket built into my object and all these wonderful things that are selfish to me, the consumer, not a prosumer, a consumer.
Yeah.
But then once that starts happening more and more, wait a second, I can become an influencer in this space, same way that Justin TV was, where you are walking around, but you're bringing people immersively with you, and you become a prosumer tour guide within the tourism space. Not to mention all the other things that start happening as everybody starts to use the platform and starts to do things like Pokemon Go is a wonderful example. Everybody remembers hordes of teenagers running through Central Park. What the hell are they going? Oh, they're on Pokemon Go. That thing is now possible with this platform that we're allowing for. It's not that, oh, great, now we can have another Pokemon Go. It's that everybody can make their own Pokemon Go. And there can be, why we're called parallel worlds all stacked on top of each other, all for you to choose which one you ever want, whenever you want, and switching interoperably easily between them. This all still comes down to not the tech, but the UX. This patent that I have is not a tech patent, it's a UX patent. Coinbase didn't win the crypto war because they had the best tech. It's because they had the easiest, simplest screen on a phone that people could then go, I just bought crypto. Look at it there. That's it. That's why they won.
Yep.
That's part of what this development structure is going to go through, is no matter what we have right now, it is the iteration of the user experience that's going to help people understand what window they need in front of them as their world changes that they'll actually engage with, that can then lead to that social network effect.
That's why I love the name Parallel Worlds, because it really does describe what you're creating. And funnily enough, Site Network is social interactive twin economy, which really describes the other aspect of what we're building, you know. And you mentioned before, and I think that Pokemon Go is such a beautiful example of this, because many people in the world know each other. I would never have known each other other than through massive multiplayer online gaming. Right? I can hear the upstairs neighbor kid who's in his late teens and shouting and laughing with people that he's never physically met, right? And a lot of people have these relationships they wouldn't otherwise have them. But Pokemon Go also showed us that digital can facilitate real world relationships, real world travel, real world destinations that people would otherwise never have had. So we are going to be looking, and these are early indications of the possibilities of the future. And that these things will be, you mentioned also the potential to put a chip, an NFT chip in a product, which obviously we're going to be doing and you guys are already doing. But these chips are going to be less safe. Exactly, the pocket ducks. I came up with a name, by the way, an early name for our bringing together of our two things. Introduction. See what I did? Anyway, so, but the separation of the chip from the product. Now the chip is stuck to the product, but pretty soon the product will be the chip. You know, the paint in the painting will be the thing that stores the information or the canvas or whatever. So they will be so inextricably linked that it won't seem as if we're just tagging something on to a picture, which you could then remove and stick on another picture, right? It will be inextricably linked, just the same as we're taking the NFT from being a receipt for a product, which renders it kind of pointless, and making them one and the same.
And yeah, part of that really has to go to when we move from this to glasses. Exactly. When it becomes a permanent layer over us, when the screen is no longer the computer in front of us, but the lens in front of us permanently. When that happens, we will redefine our idea of what is real. Because going to the philosophy major, it doesn't matter what's in front of you. It's all real if you say it's real. Our brains don't work where it's just, well, this is metal, therefore it's real. And this is a digital ink, so it's not real. Our brains don't care, but it has to happen. And we know we're on the one side of this, and we know when we get to the other side, valuation will change when we understand that a physical object can have digital iterations of itself that will be just as real as this other thing. So when you buy a Gucci bag that costs $2,000, but is really $15 to make, the bag's not going to really matter. It can be torn, it can be stolen. It's more that the decentralized network says that is your bag. And we remember that you took it to the Met Gala. And that's built into your provenance of your bag. And we'll send you a new Gucci bag. That's not the problem. It's the ownership inside of it and our understanding of what it means to have something and to pass that on and to add our values to it. Not just value, but values over time. That all matters. but not until we actually live in that space.
And there's going to be people that go, oh well, how can it have intrinsic value if it's not the original bag? The original bag's the value. Well, let me give you an example here. There are plenty of fake Gucci bags out there. There arguably could be ones that are of a higher physical quality and physical and workmanship than the original Gucci bag, but the one that's the Gucci bag is the one that has the higher value. And people would say, well, that's as it should be. It's coming from Gucci. It doesn't matter whether the other one's actually a better quality product. It's not real Gucci. Well, this is saying, okay, here's the real Gucci. We're separating it and recombining it with the physical product in a way that is actually more or less mutable than any other previous form. And there are other precedents. Again, I keep looking at the picture of Albert Einstein behind you and thinking that there's a great story here in Glasgow. There's a used car salesperson called Arnold Clark, who now effectively controls the market for used car sales and car sales in Scotland. He got involved in art, and he would buy original pieces of art, and then he would have limited edition prints made of that art using photographic techniques, obviously, as you do. But there was scarcity value because they were limited edition, one of 50, one of 500. With every car, he gave the owner a free print and thereby put a bunch of those prints into the market. And the car owners were like, this is great, I got a free print, this is really nice, it's limited edition. But what he was really doing was driving up the value of the original painting by putting the prints into the market. And this is why, in some cases, economists can't quite understand what you set out to do because it is so paradigm shifting. And in
Well,
some
it's hard
cases,
as soon as
economists
you try
get
to
it immediately.
as soon as you try to explain value to anybody, like they don't want to take it to that place because it's so simple. Why is something valuable? Because I want it. That's it. That's the only reason why something has value. So the Gucci bag has value because of the brand value of Gucci.
Mm.
But on top of that, when we get into this prosumerism level, we saw this the first time this happened, not the first time, but the most famous example is Michael Jordan making a deal with Nike and creating the Air Jordan brand, where he had equity. This wasn't about, oh, sponsor, and I got a big check. This is my company as much as it is yours. This is a sub company within Nike. And now that there are Air Jordans, the brand value that stands the test of time. It's crazy how much my 10-year-old wants Air Jordans. He never grew up under Michael Jordan's reign. What is this going on? It's the brand value that carried through. But now I can buy an Air Jordan and I can make the Jaime Air. And if I'm influential enough, somebody's going to want to buy that specific thing. Jeff Staple was a wonderful example of a sneaker artist, basically created the influencer sneaker head culture to begin with. And he was the first artist to use ERC 6551 to build the Stapleverse.
Yeah.
But it's funny where these things can go. His first thing was because he uses the New York City pigeon as his logo. He made a pigeon hat, and then what you can add to that NFT is a shit stain, shit stain on top of it.
Nice.
And it's wonderful. It's the art. It's whatever you want it to be. Somebody wants it. It's a value.
It's true. And there's other things that we will use as humans to attribute value without even realizing it. Scarcity value fascinates me from a psychological perspective because is caviar nicer than bacon? Arguably it's fish jam, right? It doesn't really, it's nice on cold butter toast, but what isn't, right? But it's rare, and rare means that people will pay more for it. But if bacon was rare, people would war over it, right? Because it's tasty, or any of these things which are commonplace, but we don't place value on them because they're not scarce, right? And so it tends to be that we also, with designer goods, will say it's expensive because it's expensive. We launched it to be expensive and that makes it rare and scarce, which drives up the value. And okay, fine, but is that meritocratic? I know, equally with designer brands, people will pay more to buy a sweatshop made T-shirt that says Dolce and Gabbana on the front because it says Dolce and Gabbana on the front. But does that make it a better T-shirt? No. Back in the day, if you were going to wear somebody's brand on your chest, it was called a sandwich board, and they would pay you to wear it. You wouldn't pay them, right? So we are actually taking some of this nonsense from the way that things have gone in terms of consumer capitalism and bringing it back to meritocratic values where you'll do it if there's value to it, and then you'll get, if you're adding value to the brand, you'll earn from that.
I'm curious where scarcity goes in a prosumerist culture, where blockchain allows for things like fractionalization and brands within brands within brands within brands. So you'll get to this point where playing this out, and I have no idea where this goes. I'm just making it up as we're talking.
Yep.
You have Nike, Air Jordan, Jamie, David, some random person who bought it and then is trying to add on top of it.
Mm.
That's a super, super, super rare, unique thing. But it's depends on every single step of the way. What kind of influence did that value add create? So there's going to be, for every single person who successfully becomes a co-creator in the space, another way of talking about a prosumer is a co-creator. We're already past the influencer economy to the creator economy. Co-creator economy comes next.
Yeah.
Not everybody who wants to become an influencer is successful. Not every creator is successful, but that doesn't stop people from trying. And it goes back to the open market again. So what becomes unique over time, though, is going to be interesting. Is it going to be only the limited runs that Nike runs out, or is there going to be this kind of super interesting, more and more unique chain that ends up coming along? And of course, hey, Nike can allow it or not to have fractionalized it. So if I make Air Jamies, can I only sell 500 of them? And then there are only going to be 500 of them. Maybe Nike decides that. Maybe I decide that. Whoever's at the end of the chain has to obey anyone further up the chain. That's part of the blockchain rules.
Which I think, given that we are just about to run out of time, is a very good point to end on. So, well, first of all, thank you, Jamie. It's always a pleasure talking to you about this kind of stuff because there's so many different aspects to this. There's the economic, there's the sociological, there's the psychological, there's the physiological. I think we've covered everything in this conversation, and we don't know where it's going to go. It's just a very exciting launch pad, really, isn't it? But and that's what's wonderful about it. We've got our ideas of where it's going to go, but I just think that what you've created is a fundamental foundation for the change that's going to happen. And I'm really excited to be in the journey with you. And what I would like anybody who's watching this who has any opinion on this whatsoever, who's thinking, nonsense, what you're saying is wrong, tell us why we're wrong, or tell us, actually, I think it's going to go in this direction, or, we want to hear it because, I don't know, who can predict the future? So the more of your opinions that we get on this, better, and the better informed we can be. And if you think, oh, there's an inherent risk to this going forward, tell us so that we can try to do something to avoid it. Because we're not just going to ignore you if there's danger ahead. We want to know. So yeah. Any other thoughts?
I want to double down on that, not by saying in any way that we are these people, but that imagine this is whatever it is, 1975, and we're Steve and Woz having a conversation about the personal computer and what the hell we'll be able to do with computing in our own homes. And you have an opportunity to join into that conversation. Yeah. We're not those people, but we're having a conversation about just as big a leap. And if you want to be a part of that beginning of that kind of conversation, we will reach back out. We love these things.
Oh, yeah. We've been doing this forever. This is why this whole thing is happening. So yeah, reach out to us, talk to us. We will talk back because yeah, we're all stronger together here. Awesome. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you everyone for watching. And we hope to continue the conversation from here.